This week, we continue our deep dive into the Korea-U.S. relationship with a focus on business ties. Next year marks the 70th anniversary of not only the military alliance between the two countries, but also the establishment of the Korea-American Chamber of Commerce in Korea. AMCHAM was born on the ashes of the Korean War and has grown today to become an essential partner for both U.S. and Korean companies. On this episode, our globalist is Jaimeskim, the chairman and CEO of AMCHAM Korea. So, welcome, Chairman and CEO of AMCHAM, Jaimeskim, or because we're friends, I know you to be Jim Kim. So welcome.
Thank you very much. Great being here today.
Let's start off. I didn't know that AMCHAM has been here for 70 years. That's a long time. When you think about it, AMCHAM in Korea, in terms of Korea's modern history, AMCHAM has always been around. But in reality, though, what actually does AMCHAM do?
Well, I think we do a lot here in Korea. As you know, our mission is really three things. Number one is to help U.S. companies in Korea succeed. The second thing is we want to bring a lot of U.S. SMEs to Korea. And obviously, a third is to help Korean companies invest in America. So the four things we really do are, number one, we want to help these U.S. companies sell what they have here in the Korean market to our platform. Second is advocacy. When companies in Korea get into some challenging situations with regulatory items, that's where we come in and help. The third one is we have so much information through our 30 committees. So with that information flow, they can operate their businesses a lot better. And lastly, it's the networking piece. We feel that we can really be a good bridge between two CEOs, between the CEO and some officials, to really help their business succeed in either Korea or in the U.S.
To make more U.S. and Korean companies succeed as much as possible.
Absolutely.
Anything you can do.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Is it different from country to country, or is that sort of uniquely, and even that role, does it change from time to time in terms of the country's development?
Well, I think that there are different AMCHAMs throughout the world, and we're all run independently, but we all have the same mission of really expanding trade between U.S. and the countries we operate in. And depending on the flavor of the leadership, the flavor of the platform that the different AMCHAMs have, that's what dictates the specific services we can offer.
Yeah. And here, under your leadership, you have a very corporate background. That's sort of a little bit unique. You've been here and working for Yahoo, Microsoft, General Motors. Am I leaving anyone out? Any of the big U.S. companies. How different does your background make the operation of AMCHAM here?
Well, I think I'm one of the more different AMCHAM leaders because of the commercial experiences that I've had. And obviously, my mission is to help companies here succeed. And because I actually ran the businesses that a lot of these member companies are involved with today, I think that I could have a much quicker look at what their challenges are, how to help them, because I've been in their shoes before. And I think that's the reason why we've been very successful in growing our platform. Because as a business person, we have a job to do. which is to execute our business plan. And we want to really help the member companies do the same thing.
And so as a corporate man yourself who's been through this and have been able to do that, what are you hearing from other corporate leaders, U.S. leaders in Korea? How are their experience in Korea?
Well, I think that we have a tendency to focus on some of the negatives, but I've been in Korea 18 years now. This is a phenomenal place to live and work. I would not be here longer than that if I thought this was a bad place to do business. So when I meet with other CEOs, they could be a complete foreigner to Korea, or even a Korean CEO here. They are very, very happy here. In fact, of course, there are challenges, but it's not unique to any other country that any other multinational, would be operating under.
I know each industry is different, and each corporation has a different kind of strategy. But is there something about a Korean market that makes it unique for a U.S. corporation?
Well, I think there are many aspects, but one of the most important aspect is the Korean workforce. I think the Korean workforce is very unique here. They work extremely hard, very diligent. They execute very, very well. And they're very loyal to the leader and to the company. So when you have a real trusting workforce like that, you could really execute the business plan that the country manager and the headquarters has agreed upon. Second is look at this technology that we have here. The digital infrastructure is amazing. It's so fast what you can do with it. And because the consumers here are also very, very fickle and demanding a lot, I think this is an amazing testing ground for new technology. And when you can win in a market like Korea, you can win in a lot of different markets. And one of our member companies is called Coupang. They started rocket delivery. What country in the world can you do this very, very quick delivery where you get your stuff before 7 a.m. when you order it before a certain time in the evening? And I think that's what makes Korea pretty amazing.
Yeah, I have heard someone say that if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere type of thing. I mean, it's a hard market to succeed in, but once you succeed here, then you're set to succeed in many different markets.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's the workforce, it's the technology, the infrastructure, as well as the consumer base itself, the character of the consumer base. In terms of the workforce, so I mean, don't we also hear about the fact that it's hard to operate here because of the inflexibility of the labor market? Unions are strong. There are a lot of demonstrations. Labor laws are strict. Is that something that American companies are able to deal with?
Well, I think that every American company should cater to the laws of the country where they operate in. Yeah, we have some strict regulations here. One of the concerns that many CEOs have had is this thing called the Serious Accident Act, where if there's a fatality in your work organization, the CEO is personally liable both criminally and legally. Yeah. And that's a very unique situation.
Yes. It's one of the new laws.
That's correct. It just started earlier this year. But again, I think it's the way that the Korean government is trying to help eradicate some issues that we've had in Korea. Korea, as you know, GA, has had the highest fatality rate amongst OECD countries. So it's a way the Korean government is saying, hey, something needs to be improved, and this is one way they're looking at it. 52-hour work week is something similar as well. I think that Koreans are considered the hardest working population in the world today. So as a result, the Korean government said, hey, this needs to stop. So maybe this is one way to do that. So I think in some respects, it could be considered very rigid, but in other respects, it could be the Korean government trying to watch out for Korean workforce for their betterment.
Something you just mentioned about Coupang. Many people sort of think AmCham is made up of only American companies, but not. I mean, what is the ratio between Korean and American companies?
Well, as I said before, our mission is to help U.S. companies here in Korea, but also to help bring Korean companies into America. And as long as our mission is catered by member companies, we're very happy with getting the right Korean companies involved with us. So the ratio, I would say, is around 70% American companies, and the rest being Korean companies, and also non-Korean companies, including European companies.
Oh, really?
Because they may be a European company headquartered in Europe, but they also have a huge presence in America.
I see.
So for us, we feel the whole world is someone that we could tap into.
So it's the multinational
Yes.
scene that is really reflected
And
in
as
your
long as
membership.
they help with the mission of AMCHAM, which is really to help U.S. companies here and Korean companies going back, it's a real win-win-win.
And you talk about the different characters of Korean companies, startups, very
Yes.
strong, American companies, very experienced. Is there impacts that the groups give each other? Is there a learning curve from both sides?
Well, obviously, the American businesses are what I call really, really mature, especially in the technology business, right? They've been here the longest. Take a look at just in the IT sector, the Microsofts, the Facebooks, the Metas of the world, Amazon, Google, you name it. They're really huge companies. And still, the Korean companies are not at that global stage just yet. So there's a lot of learning. But the second aspect is take a look at the focus on things like ESG. American companies have really started that motion, right? Especially things like, compliance. Compliance is something that American companies really, really take very, very seriously.
Yeah.
And I know that Korean companies are trying to follow that leadership, and hopefully they'll get there, as companies work together for best practices.
There are some aspects that Korea helps Korea go really quickly
Yes.
into wherever it wants to go. Finally, though, it used to be called the Korea discount, the North Korea factor. Recently North Korea has been showing signs of hostility, the nuclear weapons aspect. Is North Korea no longer a factor in making business decisions in Korea?
Even despite some of the recent missile activity, I have not had any calls from, different leaders of U.S. companies asking about, hey, should we be concerned about setting up shop here? Or should we, have our families leave a lot earlier? That has never been the case, especially now. I know several years back, that was a concern. I was working for one of the U.S. companies, and when it happened, we actually had contingency plans. People would call me and say, hey, Jim, are we okay? Please let me know when you're leaving because I'll follow you. Thinking that I had some inside information, but I don't hear that anymore.
Yeah.
I think we have a huge confidence in both the leadership of the United States and South Korea to protect the residents, both Korean citizens and non-Korean citizens living here. I'm not concerned, let's put it that way.
Good to hear, yeah.
한미 동맹도 경제 안보 시대에 맞춰 발전하고 진화해 나가야 합니다. 앞으로 양국은 반도체, 배터리 등 전략 산업 분야에서 상호 투자를 확대하고 공급망 안정화를 위해 협력해 나갈 것입니다.
SK came along as making the material that goes into these computer chips. So instead of relying on chips made overseas in places like China, the supply chain for those chips will be here in America.
Now, uncertainty. Corporate leaders never like uncertainty. But now, the global world is filled with uncertainties. And one of the uncertainties that surrounds this region is a trade conflict between U.S. and China. What impact does that have on U.S. and Korean companies dealing with each other in both the U.S. and Korea?
Well, if you take a look at the trade numbers for Korean companies, as far as their exports are concerned, 25% of all exports here go to China. And 12, 13% go to the United States from Korea. So when you look at it as a customer, China is obviously the largest customer for Korea. But I always talk about something called diversification. I'm not so sure it's so healthy to have 25% of all your customers under one basket. And this has nothing to do with being anti-China at all. It doesn't matter, just 25% seems like a real big number. And for American companies operating here, obviously they have corporate guidelines, so they need to cater to what headquarters discusses with them about different actions. But as far as we're concerned, I think smart business people will figure out a very good solution to minimize and diversify further. Look at all the Korean companies, what they're doing today. Yeah. They've diversified to Indonesia, to Vietnam. They're even diversifying away into countries like Latin America as well. So I think that's a smart thing to do.
The U.S. is also lessening dependence on China for supply chain diversification, decoupling. All of that seemed almost impossible a few years ago now seems like a reality in the making. For the time being, however, while the dependence on China is lessening and there is a more prominence on the goal to do that, the impact of something that would be from something that would anger China, like the military moves that have been made before, is still of a big concern for a lot of Korean companies. And I would think U.S. companies as well, because their interests are also linked to how the Korean market is doing. How do you see that developing?
Well, we only know that a few years ago when the THAAD situation came along, we've had a lot of Korean companies who suffered a lot of losses because of that decision to put that system here in South Korea. But I think because of that, Korean companies have learned a lot more as well. And the need for even further diversification is even more evident today. And I think that over time, things will really even out where there will be less concerns going forward.
And this is happening while Korea's presence in the minds of American companies and Americans in general is changing.
That's correct.
How do you see and reflected in how American companies, or you talked about governments, treat Korea?
Let's put it this way: you and I, we know Korea really, really well, but in America, not every state or states know about Korea. I recently hosted Senator Rick Scott from Florida, and he mentioned to me that a lot of Americans, they don't know a lot about what Korean companies are doing in America. They just don't really know. So we still need to do a lot of education. But look at the great products that Korean companies have done in America. We talked about even Bibigo, the CJ company that I think they sold $1 billion worth of mandu in America. The Los Angeles Lakers have the Bibigo patch on their jersey. So again, it's a good reflection. Look at Hyundai and Kia cars that are doing so well. Besides all the soft content from the K-dramas to K-pop and so on, right? So I think the Korean brand is now really, really strong in America, but it still has a lot of room for bigger penetration in America.
One thing that Korean companies have traditionally not really paid that much attention to is American politics.
Yes.
Because I think that has sort of been considered something that is in a different arena. But today, politics influences business. What do Korean companies need to know about the state of American politics today?
Well, that's the reason why at our seminar last week, we spent close to an hour talking about the midterm.
The midterm elections?
Yes. But we want to educate the basically all Korean audience on what this election was all about, so that they can be a lot more understanding of America, so they can make better decisions in America. So I thought that was very helpful. But now that the midterm is done, I honestly think that this is really great news for Korea. Because we have a divided Congress now, it's going to be more focused on national defense, pro-alliance, and pro-trade. And because Korea is already an established ally of America, I think this is going to be even more interesting, as we approach a few more months from now.
I think, the fact that Korean companies are not as informed as they should be about, the legal system and the politics of the United States have led to things like the Inflation Reduction Act impact that Korean companies felt had on Korea's automobile industry, for example, which could sour, any kind of good relationship between the U.S. and China. Right. How do we prevent things like that from happening?
Well, if you take a look at the IRA, I think it happened pretty quickly. I don't think anyone expected it to pass that fast. And I would say that some of the details may have been overlooked, but I feel pretty good that U.S. and Korea, because of the powerful relationship they are having good conversations, and hopefully there will be a good, win-win resolution. And I know that because of the history we've had together, 140 years of, diplomatic relation between the two countries, 70 years as an official alliance, this one matter will not derail the relationship, because I do believe over time this will work out. And if there are some short-term hiccups, over the long term, it might be a good thing for both countries. Yeah. But I can tell you, we obviously made our opinions well known, that we hope that there's a good resolution between the two countries.
And that's, actually is the important aspect of it. When trouble happens, you raise your voices and communicate.
Yes.
Which has not been easy for a lot of Korean
That's
companies. Correct. In the area of communication, you are also the first CEO and chairman of AMCHAM of Korean descent. Yes. Is that good or bad for you? Does that work to your advantage or to your I've heard both sides from government officials of Korean descent. How do you feel about it?
I think I've always been kind of a trailblazer. So for me, it was a real honor to be elected the first Korean face to represent AMCHAM. But I think it also goes to show you that times are changing, and people are going to look at the capability of the individual a lot more than ever before. And I hope that just me being in this position will provide opportunities for other leaders to take similar steps as well. I think that the whole world is about opportunities. And if you have a lot of confidence in yourself and do what it takes to succeed, you can get it done anywhere. And America is a great example, right? We see so many Koreans, Korean Americans who have done very well, which is why I believe your program, the Globalists, is here in town today, right? Yes.
Thank you for the plug. So what's next for you, for AMCHAM? What's the next level of your support for U.S. and Korean companies?
Well, I just signed an extension for, to be the chairman and CEO of AMCHAM. So I'll be here for hopefully a long time. And I'm very passionate about really, helping, again, American companies succeed here. And I want to bring as many Korean companies to America as possible. And the two things that I really want to execute is, number one, I want to help make Korea a regional headquarters of Asia. I think now is the perfect time to do that. We've had many high-profile companies moving from, let's say, Hong Kong to Korea and establishing Korea as a regional headquarters. We just had a survey recently, and Korea is now listed number 2 as the most desirable country to set up shop in Asia. Singapore is the only one.
Okay.
So now is a great time. And the second one is SMEs are very important. We want to bring more U.S. SMEs to South Korea. There are many SMEs that are not doing any business in Korea today. And we feel that's another opportunity as well.
So there's a lot of work for you.
Yes.
For many more years. And so I do hope that you reach that next threshold. on your next, or maybe next years in Korea. So we'll see you back then.
Thank you very much.
And that's it for me. For this week's Globalist, I'll be back next week with another globalist who's helping putting Korea on the map. Son Ji out.